we were trying to maybe do too much ourselves. And I think that that's one of the mistakes that I made over the years was not hiring the team quick enough. I tried to bootstrap too long, and that's not a great way to go. When you're trying to do too much, things fall off the plate, right? Like we're trying to save a nickel, but I was working for many years. I was working, 12, 13, 14 hours a day and
Wow.
neglecting my family. And that ended up with a drinking problem, right? Like, don't do what I did.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Moeller Real Estate and Business Podcast. I'm your host, Phil Moeller, and on this podcast, we will be interviewing guests that have made their mark in real estate, in business, and in other areas of life. Listening to podcasts myself has helped me in so many different ways and continues to do so. If you're a real estate investor or an entrepreneur or aspiring to be either, or just someone that wants to learn, you've come to the right place. An easy way to have an impact is to share this episode with friends or family, provide a review, or just spread the word. We greatly appreciate it, and now let's get to the show. All right. Welcome, everyone, to this week's episode of the Moeller Real Estate and Business Podcast. I'm really excited for today's guest, Nate Fisher from Columbus, Ohio. Nate, how you doing today, man?
Great, great. Thanks for having me.
I see some Woody Hayes pictures in the cold on the background there. That's fantastic. So always good to be talking with a fellow Buckeye. I want to share a little bit with the audience about Nate before we get into things here. So first of all, Nate is a multifamily guy through and through. He grew up in multifamily as part of a family business. He's been in real estate for 25 years. So I'm just excited to pick your brain and learn for the next 30, 45 minutes, whatever it is. He's the founder of Peak 10 Group. He owns 400 apartments in the Dayton area, so he invests locally. He also invests throughout the country, I know, and he's an investor in over 5,000 multifamily units total. So not only does he know how to run and operate local businesses, but just a great perspective on how other operators and other businesses run, which gives him a great perspective to help him as well. And honestly, he's a family man. He loves to ski and he does love real estate, but just an all around good guy. Again, I'm excited to learn this. Selfishly, this next 30 minutes is for me, and I hope everyone else can get some value out of it too. I know they will. So, Nate, why don't we start with, growing up in multifamily, and I didn't grow up around real estate. I grew up in an entrepreneurial family, but not in real estate. But my kids are around it now, so I'm really curious. What was that like growing up in a family business in specifically real estate?
Yeah, yeah. So, it's actually probably similar to what a lot of your listeners are doing now, right? Like you're driving to a soccer game or a sporting event with your kid, and you're like, hold on, just 1 second. Let me go look at this apartment building. Hey, what do you think about the colors here? Right? Like that was sort of my childhood, but it was I was born in one foot in the 60s, right? I was born in 1969. So, my mom and dad were doing sort of what a lot of your listeners are doing, buying a
Yep.
double, right?
Yep.
But they were doing that in the early 70s. And so, that meant driving around, looking at property on the weekends. We bought our first 50, or not we, my father. So it was my mother and my father, and I have an older
Yep.
brother who's 7 years older than me. And so, they bought the first 54 unit building in 1973. And there's a picture of me on my little, bicycle, right? Like out front, my dad's rototilling, and our home phone number was on the for rent sign, right? So, everything was running through my house. We were the
It's
leasing
incredible.
office. My mom was the bookkeeper. I worked on the lawn crew, right? And that continued for many years as the portfolio, grew. So we were, I was around this my entire life, and I
Yep.
always knew that I wanted to be in real estate. Didn't know that I always wanted to work in a multifamily family. There's challenges with that. But so, from a very young age, the Burr method was going on, and everyone worked in the business. And so, I've just been around all aspects of it, my whole life.
That's it's really interesting because I grew up around a family business, and I can just remember, in the 80s. So I'm a little bit younger than Nate here. You can't tell if you're on video, but just being around the day-to-day dynamics of a family business growing up. So I'm curious for you, what did that like? How did that mold you? Whether that's mindset or just yeah, how did that mold you or impact you?
Well, I, you know, Probably the biggest thing is the work ethic that was instilled in me by my family and my mother and father. We were maybe working too much to a fault. But just that work ethic of when you own multifamily, it's not it's not passive, as we know, right?
Yep.
And so it was 24/7, and my folks built a really great engine, and the portfolio got up to at its biggest 1,200 units in two different cities, and so
Wow.
they built a really great engine, and just being around that and learning. And it was truly owner operator, right? Like we didn't have partners, and just because of the timing, there wasn't a lot of partnership or collaboration like there is today. It was more foghorn leghorn. The real estate guys would beat each other up and then go have a beer at the end of the day. But there wasn't this partnership and collaboration. And so I really learned a lot of work ethic from the family, and the way that the deals were structured, a little bit different then than they are today. But I just learned the basics in a different way that it's applied today. But the work ethic and
What,
do whatever it takes.
so one thing I want to talk about a little bit because I know you've done it, and honestly, again, this is selfishly, I'm very interested because I'm working on building out a team, is um h- you've built a team, you have team members in different locations and have done a nice job of that. So talk about that process and the work ethic and kind of how that has all, have you always had a team in place? Have you, like how has your thought process from work ethic and grind transitioned over the years, if it has?
Yeah, let me set up just a couple of things for the listeners. We have this, I'll call it the legacy portfolio, the family business, right? And that's still in existence today. And I spent about 8 to 10 years from '08 to, yeah, 10 years, '08 to 2018, working in that business and working for the family. In 2018, I um, sort of really launched Peak 10, my company, the 400, and it's actually 430 units now in
Okay.
Dayton.
Nice.
And so, for a lot of those years, and built another team. And so for a lot of those years in the family business, we were truly bootstrapping. And maybe it's the scarcity mindset or whatever, but we were trying to maybe do too much ourselves. And I think that that's one of the mistakes that I made over the years, was not hiring the team quick enough. I tried to bootstrap too long, and that's not a great way to go. When you're trying to do too much, things fall off the plate, right? Like we're trying to save a nickel, but I was working for many years. I was working 12, 13, 14 hours a day and
Wow.
neglecting my family, and that ended up with a drinking problem, right? Like don't do what I did.
Yep.
Okay.
Interesting.
And that means build the right people around you, get a team in place. And as we talked before, it's challenging because, oh, I can't afford to get that team member, or you know I got to wait to have the money to buy that. And so I still struggle with that today, is when can I hire? Okay. And when to hire, right? Like in the down market that we're in now, or maybe foundational market, depends on what you're doing. Now's the time to hire the right people and get the right people around you. So,
Yep. Well, though,
I ground too long. I
yeah.
try to do too much myself.
And honestly, I think like work ethic is such a pride thing, I think, for a lot of people. And work
Yeah.
ethic is great. Like work ethic is great. I'm not diminishing that. And I think if you would ask people that live in my area, that would be if like, hey, what is your area known for? I think a lot of people's answer would be work ethic. But I think taken too far, it can be your biggest crutch to not only what you're saying on how it impacted you personally, but also I think how it impacts your business and the growth of your business and probably the profitability, because there's a limiting mindset of if I hire people, it costs me money versus it makes me money. Is that a fair assessment?
100%. And as many times as I tell myself that this hire that I hire should make me 3x in the next year, I still get caught up in my own, doubts or thoughts, and can't believe that, even though I know that it's
Yep.
true.
Yep.
I've gotten a lot better, but it is still a challenge for me.
Yeah, and I think the message for the listeners there maybe is that just be aware of this. Just make sure you're aware that you're probably telling yourself hiring people is it's a cost, a cost, a cost. And it's hard to see what that person can create. Like I'm reading a book right now, Buy Back Your Time, I think it's called, but it's talking about just the order of how you hire people out. And with the focus being you want to free up your time. Because if you free up your time, with the tasks that are just taking a lot of your time, it's going to free up your mind, quite frankly, to be able to grow your business. And I think, a guy like you, Nate, the best use of your time is not doing a lot of details, I don't think. It's leading a team and growing the business.
Correct. Yeah. I mean, that's my strong suit is I'll call it the family vision, right? Like seeing the big picture and actually I just hired a new CFO. We can get into team building and talking about that later, but I find myself looking too far out and I'm not looking at the trees and I'm way over here, right? Like, and
So,
he's
so
like,
what you're
wait a
telling me,
minute.
what you're telling me, Nate, is that and I'm joking about this because we're very similar in this way. I'm always looking at big picture vision, 3 5 years out, and all these team members, and like it's easy to think, okay, I'm going to have so many team members in this big business in 5 years. That's easy for people. Like that's easy for me to see. I think you're saying the same. However, hiring the next person to get to that is the hard part, right? It's like because this is like, do I really need this right now? Can I wait? Is it going to make me money or cost me money? All these limiting beliefs that we have. So tell me, you mentioned the CFO and building a team. Kind of tell me, the big transitions or ahas and just your guidance on how to build a team.
Yeah, I'll start back in 20, actually really like 2008. There was when I got into the family business, I sort of fast tracked that. I got a CPM, certified property manager designation. So when I started looking at what we needed, I saw this big demographic shift that was coming down, and I knew apartments were going to just absolutely go ballistic, right?
Okay.
And I'm looking at the family and I'm looking at the engine that mom and dad built and running it, saying, wow, I've got to get some help here. And so what I found is I found a group based out of Columbus. They work in the Midwest called Focus CFO, and they're a fractional CFO group. And that was probably one of the most important hires actually the most important hire I've ever made. And so we started small with a fractional CFO who could then quantify my crazy vision ideas 8 hours a week. And to this day, that's how we are. So that was an easy way to grow. And that allows you to think about the business
Yep.
and not be in the business. And we do that 8 hour, we were doing that for 8 hours a week. And that was pivotal. So that got us organized and got systems in place on the money side. And so I could come to this person because I'm very good at building the right consultants around me, and that's a cheap way to do this, or not cheap, or affordable way to
Yep.
scale, right?
Yep.
And so we've been really successful with outsourcing things like the CFO function, and allows me to think big picture and vision. So that building the right consultants from a transactional attorney, just general practitioner attorney, if you will. Like
Yep.
there's a group that I use that's all they do is represent real estate owners based in Columbus. So having those types of people that there's it's crazy. Some people hire consultants just to say they've hired consultants. I hire the consultants to listen to the consultants because they're the experts, not me. I
Yep.
need them to protect me from my crazy ideas.
Well,
Um,
it sounds like too, one message here is that you've built a team and like you had mentioned earlier that you have since hired a full-time CFO, but that's not where you want to start. Like there's a lot of different ways to build a team. So if people are thinking,
yeah,
okay, for me to build a team, I need to hire a full-time person that does all these things for me. That might be the right thing to do, but it isn't necessarily. There's other ways to skin the cat, right? You could hire a full-time person, but you could hire a fractional CFO, a really interesting concept. You can hire virtual team members. There's a lot of different ways to step into, getting to where you're hiring full-time team members. And I think some of that depends on your personality type, your how risky you are, if you will, some other factors. So let me ask on just because I'm kind of interested, the fractional CFO, like, do you know what a fractional CFO, high level, really good CFO, like what could someone expect to pay that person today for 8 hours a week?
okay, so I think it's real interesting. The group that I work with, think about a law firm, the way a law firm is set up, right? There's
Yep.
partners, and the group of CFOs, these guys are guys and women, are usually people that are in the second half of their career. They've already spent time at big firms, and so they have a lot of big firm experience, and they enjoy sort of having a fiduciary responsibility to you. the small business owner, and they get to pop around. It's a great kind of little setup. So
Yep.
um, it's roughly around $200 an hour. And
Okay.
so you really, you kind of got to think maybe starting with, 800 bucks a week, 4 hours a week is a very palatable amount of money for the level of knowledge and experience you're going to get.
Yep.
And so, for a long time, we did run about $8,000 to $10,000 a month for a CFO. So you just have to kind of look at your business,
I think
and
what's
decide.
interesting though is I think if you think about hiring again, this we're talking about the CFO a little bit in that
Yep.
hire, but if you hire a fractional CFO, that's maybe 4 hours a week. Let's say it's just even $1,000 a week, 50 grand a year, but you can do a lot of the work, the tactical work, bookkeeping and other stuff in house. So you can have a full finance department, quite frankly, for not a ton of money and have a really like what you need that CFO for is the setup and the strategic guidance is really what you need, I would imagine. And again,
Yes.
we're talking about a CFO, but there's a lot of ways to think about how to leverage different parts of your business and outsource that.
Yeah, that's correct. And if you get an, if you're scaling up and depends on the level of reporting you might need from your investments or your own investments or your investors, right? So it's spending that time thinking about the business and what you need to deliver to the stakeholders, and whether your stakeholders are your family, or maybe you own everything yourself. It's what you want to read about or hear about or be tracking. So
Yep.
yeah, there's a whole combination of ways to do it. Even outsourcing instead of, maybe if you have enough investments, maybe you think you need an asset manager.
Yep.
And so there's ways to outsource that. And, I find the passive investments, as I'm growing that side of my business, my partners don't provide enough reporting to make me and my family happy. So I want to do another level.
First of all, you mentioned CFO, asset manager, property manager, acquisition manager. Actually, I'm actually in the process of hiring what I'm calling an operations manager, but it's to help with asset management, acquisitions management, and property management. So thinking about different ways where there's kind of some synergies and alignment. And I'm, a decade or more behind what you're doing. But tell me more about what the team looks like right now, and what's your focus with the team for 20, we're recording this in December, but coming into 2024, what is your focus with the team?
Yeah, so really, I'm looking at, we've been spending a lot of time with the new CFO quantifying where are we at with our investments, both active and passive.
Yep.
What do we have coming?
So yeah, you're really trying to position for 2024. You were talking about active and passive investments, just understanding what it all looks like. Tell me more about that.
Yeah, so part of the new CFO coming on board is really going through all of the investments, understanding how the real estate deals were set up, and then talking with the operators, whether it's me, the operator,
Yep.
or it's a third party passive investment. What's our loans look like? How's the performance? What's your debt look like? And so part of that's it getting him integrated, and part of that's us quantifying where do we have holes in the portfolio, where do we have capital calls coming, who might need help. A lot of these folks, it's nice to have a relationship. Maybe they need another set of eyes on their deal.
And
Maybe we
honestly,
can
I
lend a helping hand.
I think the key to that is like from a financial leader in the business is understanding everything. And with understanding everything, what are they going to help identify? Challenges and opportunities, right? I mean, they're going to be identifying those throughout and saying, hey, here's the top three, risk or challenges we have with our whole portfolio. This is what's going on. And here's our, best opportunities. And it just allows you and him to kind of strategize and talk through what you want to do about those things, right?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, when with previously, I had never thought about a 60-month cash flow ahead of me, right?
Yep.
So, um, so there's a mix
Wow.
of,
60
because we
month
have,
cash flow.
right, right. So, and part of this I want to share with the listeners. When my lens that I look out of is three generations of real estate people: mom and dad who are in their 80s, my brother and sister and I who are in our 50s, and now we have adult children.
Yep.
So when I look at things, I look in three generations out. And so the other part of this is we're really documenting everyone's personal financial statements, all their assets. So we have an easy way to track this. And that tracking leads all the way into estate planning. So, while I'm also thinking about my own property management world, some in the family business. I'm also looking as call it family investment manager lens
Yep.
and thinking about all these people that are my loved ones and how do we structure things to be beneficial for everybody. And so we're really trying to have a big look.
And I think, my takeaway on that, Nate, is that because you've had this mindset of hiring either fractional CFOs or consultants or just really smart people around you, and then even your comment earlier about, okay, my job is to listen to what they have to say and learn from them. I think the cumulative effect of that over 10, 20 years is now a lot about family office planning and long-term strategy that you wouldn't know if you didn't hire those people. So when you hire people, it's not just what can you do for me today, but it's also you're investing in an education that you're getting from them that you can now apply to three generations um, of real estate investors. So that's really powerful. And from our conversations in the past, just yours and mine on different topics, I know that from a kind of a family office, family strategy, wealth planning perspective, you are very, very knowledgeable in the topic. And I think that comes from a lot of years of experience and probably a lot of opportunities and challenges, I would suspect.
Yeah. I mean, I always, I do like to learn stuff and I'm always learning, and that's probably a fault of mine. Maybe I spend too much time researching things and don't go home early enough to be with the family, but I do like to learn lots of things. And so, it's crazy. You get in these groups of people and you're like, oh, wow, like I didn't look at it that way. And then I go down that rabbit hole and learn and think about how can I apply that to my situation, and
Yep.
when I look at a real estate deal, it's like, okay, all right, how do we structure this? Can we structure it this certain way? Let me put my estate planning glasses on. Let me think about the tax liability. Maybe the structure we have, okay, do we put the grandkids in the deal? What's that structure look like?
Yep.
So I'm always thinking in this, I'll call it like 3 or 4 dimensions. It's kind of crazy, but I get off on that. Like
Yeah.
that's exciting to me.
Well, and again, I think just the last thing I'll say, and I want to shift gears to um, being a value add or turnaround artist. But before we go there, is just think about hiring people or consultants, attorneys, CPAs, whoever it might be, not just the immediate value you get, but the education you get from that too. That's an element of what you get out of those things. So I do want to shift gears though. That's good stuff too. This is a little bit more like a lot of the stuff we just talked about. It's about real estate, but it's really about business. It applies to anyone, any business owner, but this is more specific to real estate and multifamily. Although honestly, a lot of the themes could be applied to other businesses. But you're a turnaround artist. You buy multifamily value add. So what what is a turnaround artist, and why do you want to be a turnaround artist?
So I think that there's various levels of turnaround artists. And so what I grew up around, I'll call it like the craziest turnaround artist. I mean, my mom and dad and my brother were so good at this. And it's almost I almost coined the term of neighborhood stabilization, okay? Like banks, my dad and the family business developed this reputation when properties would get so run down, the banks would just call and say, hey, we've got something for you. And my dad, like, yeah, like I would love a challenge. And there's one specific property, and this will maybe set it up for your listeners. 200 units, okay, 20% occupied. All right. The
Wow.
bank calls and works out a deal with the seller and the bank to where my family closed on this deal at 20% occupied. And my dad walks away with like $750,000 from the deal to turn this property, around. And I mean, it was the eyesore of the neighborhood. And just building by building, the bank had to believe in my family, and just going building by building and getting this thing back up and going. And I remember my folks got an award from the city because I think the police runs went from, like 700 the year before
Wow.
to to 30, right? And so that's a deep level. And that it's interesting that the neighborhood, that stabilized the whole neighborhood. we were the stabilizing force. This multifamily was surrounded by single family. Think about how much our hard work changed the single family
Yep.
homeowners' lives. They started fixing up their buildings
Yep.
and it just raised the whole neighborhood up. So,
Well,
that's a real deep level.
honestly, and I think, first of all, there's some great, I'm sure, financial results of these turnaround projects. And that's maybe a driver for a lot of people and why they do it, because it's a very, very attractive. But there are just, I'll say, either not even, I don't want to say slumlords, or just people that don't know how to run real estate or real estate operations. And when you know how to do that, it's not just impacting your bottom line, but it's also impacting a lot of people that live there. Maybe there's some people that shouldn't live there, but the whole neighborhood, the whole community, right? Like all the home values of all that entire neighborhood, they gained 10, 20, $30,000 of equity in their own house because of what you did. And your
Yep.
residents had a great place to live and a safe place to live. I mean, 700 police runs to 30 is an astronomical improvement, right? That had a lot of impact on a lot of people. Just people that lived there just felt safe. So I think that's fantastic. I do, of course, want to get into the numbers on this though. Like, so that whether it's that deal or like value add, how does this work? On that 200 unit deal, like he walked away with 700K. I'm assuming he assumed some debt on that he had to pay back over time, but just value add multifamily, and how does that work and why is it so attractive?
Well, I mean, I think that's the game that we've been playing for the past 10 years, right? That game was great. And just to quickly, we just came through this crazy. I remember back in 2013 when we really got heavy into the value add strategy in Texas, going to look for properties that were, maybe they had been the original family that developed it, right? Still owned the property. They were running the property on a legal pad, right? They weren't even using a computer. And so there's different varying levels of value add, right? There's operational value add, right? Like, let's just go in and improve
Yep.
the operations. And then there's the physical value add and maybe changing the tenant demographic to add value. So that was the game that worked after 08, 09. But properties had been at the bank. They were completely run down. They were completely not operational. So there's varying degrees of levers you can pull when you're doing the value add. And I think it's interesting, you look at guys that are doing a lot of merger or small business buying, right? Every time
Yep.
we buy a complex, it's essentially buying a small business, and you're
Yep.
trying to max out the revenue.
Yeah, no,
Um,
that's the
it,
analogy I was saying earlier, is
yeah.
it's real estate value add. It's just like you're almost like a private equity business that's buying a business that might not being run as good as it could for whatever reason, right? That could need more new equipment, new machinery, new capital. In this case, maybe new turns, new roofs, new windows, blacktops, whatever it might be. There's investments that you can put into the property, but there's also operational items. So better marketing, better customer service, how to manage your expenses better because we're spending too much on those types of things, or our payroll is too high. There's all kinds of ways to improve a business. So if you're a business owner and you know how to do this, um, it just real estate and business are similar in that way. So how help the listeners understand how business, not how business, how real estate is valued. So you buy a property and it's not run well and it needs capital. How does that benefit you? And what is the result after a year or two of improving it? How does that math all work?
Well, let me go back. One of the things it took me a long time to realize, and I think this is very important, is when you look at a property or you look at the cycle that we're in, um, try to figure out. I mean, think about a big apartment complex, right? These are living, breathing things in reality, and there's
Yep.
different stages, right? They're built, right? There's one buyer who builds it. There's one owner who builds it. Then it gets stabilized and it's sold for max value, right? Because you've really increased the net operating income, which drives
Yep.
the value.
Correct.
And then the next couple buyers buy it, and they don't put any money into it, and it gets run down.
Yep.
So I think it's looking at these living, breathing things and saying, where is this property in the cycle of its life? Because it can be so improved that it might not be there might not be any value add left. in it because it's already been improved as
And,
much
and
as it can be.
And in my opinion, that cycle of where it's at is not dependent on market cycles. It's dependent on owner cycles. Who's owning it? Who's
Correct.
operating it? And maybe even that owner 10 years ago could have been a great operator, but things have changed, life has changed, or they just let it go or put a bad person in place. So maybe it's even within that owner has changed what cycles it in. So I think being able to see and observe and understand that is the key. The market matters, but that's really a big factor.
Yeah, and I mean, there's just that's what's so exciting about this business is there are so many levers, right, in front of you when you're driving your business. Try to identify the levers that you can pull to create value. Okay. And so you could have, yeah, you might have an arsenal of 250 levers in front of you that you can use, but what are the top 10 levers that you could pull on that property? It might be a technology lever. It might be too many, might be a people lever,
Yep.
right? It might be, physical improvements or not enough. You're right. Different owners get tired. I mean, if they own a property for 20 years, they might be burnt out. They're just
Yep.
on autopilot, right?
Yep.
So what levers need to be pulled to create that value? And the same thing goes with, your financial lever, right? Like where did you assume the debt? What do you think's going to happen? Oh, okay, this. So
There's
it's
all
really
kind
identifying those levers.
there's so many yeah, so top line, bottom line, debt structure, ownership phase of life. There's so many different factors that can impact the value. And just to summarize then how it works, I mean, net operating income is what you're generating before your debt service on a business. And you
Correct.
take
Yes.
that divided by a cap rate, which is relatively close to usually just above interest rates. So the NOI
Correct.
divided by that cap rate, that's your value. So if you improve a property where you're adding, let's say on average $100 of additional income because you've improved units across 100 units times 12 months divided by a cap rate, you can have a big
Yeah.
impact. And that's the equity game that you can play. By the way, it also builds cash flow. So that's value add real estate is really a great opportunity. And the good thing about it is in my opinion, we're talking 100, 200 unit complexes today. In my opinion, this applies to 2 unit, 4 unit, 8 unit properties. It applies to any small or medium sized multifamily. Maybe not the exact formula, but generally speaking, you can do value add in all types of multifamily, which means the barrier to entry isn't like buying a private equity business. Your barrier to entry is can you buy a duplex or a quad and then slowly grow into the larger properties.
Yeah. And let's go in a little bit more with that. I also think, there's a strategy for each property, right? You
Yep.
have your personal strategy and the strategy for the property. And I think it's important to diversify your strategies in different ways, right? Because what we just came out of was a lot of value add with event based. So
Yep.
you had to you could take a big win by selling. But I think it's important to look inside your own personal business plan and say, what's my diversification? Because if you're all event based sell properties,
Yep.
then you don't have any cash flow.
Yep.
So you need to be thinking about, I want some cash flow in here. Oh, and I could sell this property, but maybe I'll hold this one because I can do this, this, and this, juice that NOI, have more cash flow. So when the market changes, you have that steady cash flow.
Yep.
If you're all event based, you end up with nothing. You're standing there and you got all this money, but now you got no place to put it.
Yep.
So I think that strategy is important to think about as you're adding or a double or a trip, and as you're adding these things, get some cash flow, maybe one that you value add and sell, right?
Yep.
Try to look at what you can make and say, how long would I have to hold this property to make the same that I could sell it? But don't sell, maybe selling everything isn't always the right answer.
And I don't think you should
Um,
rely on having to sell either. But so I
no.
honestly I think this is like it's always a debate is my focus on this property to build cash flow or maximize the equity or long-term wealth I can create from the property? And I think your point there early was that that's a personal decision. The the property you're buying should influence what it's like what the strategy is absolutely. But your personal situation, your just sources of income, what that looks like. You should have a personal financial strategy too. And the properties you're buying should support that. The nice thing is, if you really focus on building cash flow in multifamily, in essence, you're building equity as well because you're increasing the value of that. And you then have like with equity comes options. Maybe not options at any point in time, but in general, if we're in a market where you can sell and you focus on cash flow for 5 years, now you can exercise that equity in a lot of different ways, whether it's sell,
True.
maybe it's refinance. So equity provides options, but I think your point is don't be too much all or one or the other. Because if you're just all equity, then it's very event based and you don't have cash flow or possibly vice versa. So good stuff.
Yeah.
Well, Nate, I think we could go on and on about this. It's already been like a little while here. So I think we hit 2 of the 10 topics we wanted to cover, but this is fantastic stuff. Um, I want to switch gears a little bit and just talk about, your factors of success and what you think those main factors um have been and what your focus is. So what would you say are the key 1 or 2 things that have contributed or that have been keys to your success?
I think getting out of my own way, willingness to learn, I never want to be the smartest guy in the room. I always want to be the dumbest guy. I know that's kind of cliche, but don't be afraid to ask questions. Don't try to do it all yourself. That's what I love about the real estate business today is that, we can have these kind of conversations. We can learn from each other. I can call up my counterparts and say, hey, I need another set of eyes. Like, don't be afraid to ask for some help. Um,
Yep. I think so many
I
times,
love, yeah,
especially if we kind of circle it back all the way to the work ethic discussion we had at the beginning, is so many times
right.
there is this mindset that I need to figure this out. I need to be the smartest person. I need to know it all. But if you can be the person that's saying, no, I don't want to be the smartest. I'm not going to let my ego get in the way. I don't need to be the smartest guy in the room. I just want to hire people that are phenomenal at just they know what they're doing and they're phenomenal at executing. What a great mindset that I think can be just propel you to success, as you said.
Yeah, I mean, it's just, that work ethic has led to a lot of success and that willingness to ask for help, and be willing to take the help and learn from it. Um, there we're not reinventing the wheel out here. There's somebody that probably, it's okay to say, hey, how do you see this? Right? I need another set of eyes. Just want to see what you think about this. Every time I do that, and again, back to the consultants, like, I always take calls from the brokers. Hey, what's going on out there? I always talk to my mortgage people. Hey, take a look at this. How do you see this?
Yep.
And they're like, did you think about it this way? And I'm like, oh no, I
there
didn't.
there's
Gosh.
there's there's so many sources of education in the finance, like learn about the banks and their business and how they're thinking about things. Talk to agents and brokers and understand what's going on out there, who's doing well and why. Like there's and those are all free, that's all free advice, right? Those are just people you're networking with or talking with on a regular basis. So there's so many opportunities to learn. I want to stay on the topic of learning. You talked about willingness to learn. How, you know, outside of putting yourself around people like consultants and fractional CFOs and team members, how do you educate yourself? Like, what's the primary ways that you educate yourself?
I mean, really, I think in today's day and age, it's the, looking at the book list.
Yep.
What are you reading, right? And I do watch a lot of YouTube. I mean, I have a TV right there behind me. I watch a lot of YouTube. I have a number of different programs that I like to watch because I'm always learning. I like to get other opinions. So I have a group of real estate podcasts I like to listen to and I like to watch. So um,
What
that's
would it
that seems
take?
to be my.
What would it take for me to get our podcast on your list of podcasts to listen to? We'll
Well,
work on
I mean, I
that.
love. I think you're going to make it. I love talking to you. I think you bring a lot of value. So I'm going to watch the other guests and see if you can move up the list. I
All
got
right.
you at number 10 right now.
All right. I'll work on it. I appreciate that, Nate. The other question is, who is someone? Um, I'm going to make a note to make sure I follow up with that in 6 months from now and see if I'm still at number 10. But who is someone that's really had a great impact on your success, and why is that?
Gosh, again, I probably got to go back to my family. Like just I got to go back to multiple people in the family and just, having a brother in the business, having a sister in the business. And it's just, having a group of people I can go to. Like I've just learned a lot from, we talk once a week. We have a standing call and we talk about what's going on and just learning from each other. I mean, and them challenging me to go out and if they don't know something, I'll go find it out. So I wouldn't say that I've had a one single person. I did hire a mindset coach this year, which has been very good for me. That's had a big impact on me recently. And so that's like, it's interesting, right? It's like part therapy, part business.
Yeah, interesting.
It's weird, but that's been very helpful as of late. And that's been the way that's had a big impact on me on 23 was hiring a mindset coach and just spending that time like, hey, this is how I view something. And, and being vulnerable to that person and then listening to, they say, well, that's not going to achieve anything. That only makes you happy inside. Like that doesn't, so being, that's had a big impact on me lately.
That's awesome. And if I think about like the summary of this episode, I started with over 400 apartments, over 5,000 apartments invested in, over 25 years of experience. Honestly, if you go back to, 1973 when you're 4 years old in there, I can't do the math, that 50 years of experience. If you count when you were 4 years old, I don't know if you can put that on a resume, Nate, but if you think about someone with your experience and you're sitting here on this podcast saying, all the people you're putting yourself around that you're trying to identify that can help you grow and learn at, given your experience. You're not saying I have everything figured out. You're saying, okay, we've had some success here, but I have a lot of people I can learn from. If that's my father, my family, my siblings, consultants, mindset coaches, fractional CFOs, having a growth mindset, and just educating
Yes.
yourself and identifying different ways to do that, to me, is the big takeaway. It's not Nate Fisher sitting here saying you need to hire a fractional CFO or you need to consult with this person or that person. It's saying look for people in your network. How can you leverage the knowledge that they have and do it and try to add value back, but just learn from others, even with arguably 50 years of real estate experience. Is that a fair takeaway?
Yeah, I mean, it really is. It's just always wanting, it's constantly evolving, right? The landscape is constantly evolving and changing. And if you get stuck in one way and don't want to learn anymore, you're going to get left behind. You always have to be adapting. And that sounds cliche, but
Right.
again, just putting yourself around people that are like-minded. We love to talk about ourselves, right? For your listeners, if you've got a tough deal, reach out to me. I'll love to talk with you about it,
Yep.
right? Like maybe I can bring and I always one of the things I didn't share was I always have interns in the office. I hire one intern a year, and that's really therapeutic for me because I can then go mentor and talk about, hey, this is what I think might be important, and I try to craft an experience for them that 21-year-old Nate would have liked to have had, right?
Yep.
And that keeps me fresh because they're learning this stuff and I'm like, hey, what'd you learn, right? And that keeps me engaged and in touch and up to speed. So
Yep.
that's another thing I've done that's been really helpful.
I just think honestly that like that mindset, like you talked about some of the different keys to your success. I think your mindset around education, learning, and adding value and contributing is what has been a big part of getting you where you are. So I absolutely love it. Nate, you mentioned people being able to reach out. Tell us more about how people can just get in touch with you.
Yeah, I mean my company website is peak10group.com
Okay.
or my personal site, which has a little bit more about me, natefisher.net. That's probably the best way. Yeah, natefisher.net, or I'm on LinkedIn and love to talk with people. If you've got something, hey, I'm stuck on this. I haven't looked at it this way. Love to just chat with you.
And I know
I
you
mean,
guys, for the listeners, Nate is extremely sincere. He's in the Columbus, Ohio area, so especially if you're there, I'm guessing he'd grab coffee, lunch. Like he's always
yep.
looking to have an impact and help other people too. We didn't dig into that a ton. He referenced it at the end with the interns and what he's doing. So just an amazing guy, Nate. This has been a lot of fun. Again, I think we could talk for maybe 1 to 5 more hours, but we got to wrap this up. So
Thanks,
Nate,
Phil.
thanks so much for all your just knowledge and wisdom you were willing to share with the group. This is Phil Muller with the Muller Real Estate and Business Podcast, signing off. Thank you for listening to the Muller Real Estate and Business Podcast. We hope you found today's episode helpful. If you know current or aspiring investors or entrepreneurs or anyone that would benefit from today's episode, we appreciate you sharing it with them, or better yet, providing us a 5-star review. To learn more about Muller Real Estate, visit our website at www.mullerre.com. You can also sign up for our newsletter or local events via our website. In closing, I encourage you to be purposeful in all areas of life, educate yourself, network with others that have been successful, take action, and lead. Thank you.